Today on the Interleague, we have Andrew NK Inc. Erickson. He currently plays for Velocity Esports and is their man in the jungle. Playing competitive games all his life, he has experience with Halo and other FPS as well. Competing in the Challenger circuit during the spring split, Velocity eliminated Team Marn in order to qualify for summer. Finishing Season 3 with a 5-win, 23-loss record, Erickson and Velocity now face relegation and a long break before Season 4. And everybody, welcome to the show, Andrew Erickson. Andrew, how's it going?
I'm doing great.
Good. Andrew, of course, like I just said, is the jungler for Velocity Esports. LCS team just finished 8th place in the LCS. I was just talking to him actually before the show started about how, you know, during the season you kind of always have this air of kind of uncertainty with teams, and now that the split's over, we can actually kind of look at objectively like what actually happened. So I guess starting off, do you mind just like letting us know, I guess, how the mood is in the Velocity house now that you guys have finished your, 8th place? You're going to be facing promotion relegation in terms of, for the next split.
We're all kind of just like, we thought we would do better this split, honestly. So we're all kind of upset about that, but there's a really big window between the end of the split and promotion relegation. So we're all like probably going to get over it by then, because it isn't till December. So that's like 2-3 month window where you have time to just like get better and kind of analyze what you did wrong.
Yeah, and especially now that we have the time between now, Worlds happens, and then, like you said, December. Does that kind of like give you a lot of time to, are you going to be using that to analyze like what you guys did wrong or what you guys can improve on, or is it kind of be like a little bit of a relaxation period as well?
Right after the split ended, we decided the best time to like kind of take a break would be like right after the split. So we were going to take a 1 or 2 week break and then just kind of go really hard to get ready for the promotion relegation matches. Is
it after 9 weeks of LCS? Is that rest really needed? Because it seems like if I had to do something like that, I'd be pretty burnt out.
Yeah, it's really helpful to kind of have a break to kind of just cool off and like relax and not think about League of Legends. Because during the split, like when you're in last place, it's like you're really, really motivated to get out of last place because that's like the last place you want to be. And it's really difficult to like kind of figure out how to get out of last, because it's not always just like what you're picking or what you're banning or whatever. It's like how you're playing, and like fixing how 5 people play in a week is really, really difficult, and it just like starts to kind of snowball. Whereas if you lose 1 week and lose the next week and the next week and the next week, there's just like so much motivation to get better that like start doing crazy stuff like kicking people and like replacing people, or like you just like get to the point where you don't want to run crazy stuff even though it might be good, because it's not safe to run crazy stuff. If you just play straight up, there's probably a better chance you win than if you run crazy stuff. So it's really just one of those things.
Yeah, definitely. Like I can imagine that it's a momentum thing, and that's mentioned so much during the LCS, is that momentum, in terms of wins, losses, it seems that at the beginning of the split, you guys had issues coming into the team house in terms of like, moving everyone out here. And of course, that's a solve it sooner rather than later thing. I recall in an earlier interview we were saying that, that you guys had the option of either flying everyone out, which would definitely cause some synergy issues, or just, taking the time to make sure everyone came in. And then later you were mentioning, or even just in the Velocity team history anyway, you had some role switches, some, players coming in, out. Now that you have this big, gap now, it's almost like you have free reign to make the mistakes you need in order to come back.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
No, I was actually letting you go, so
okay.
Don't worry.
Well, pretty much like the big break is kind of nice just because it gives you, like, you can reflect back on the LCS season and, like, look at how you practice and what you did to improve and kind of, like, analyze that and see how you can improve better. Because over the LCS season, we watched replays from time to time to, like, analyze it, and we did all of that kind of, like, stuff you're supposed to do to get better. But the biggest thing that we think we could improve for the next set to just, like, get better is we were going to, like, watch replays with audio. Because if you're just watching the replay, that doesn't really change your communication habits,
Yeah.
And that's one of the harder things to improve as a team, your communication. So if you watch the replays with audio, I think that's one of the biggest improvements we're going to make in our preparation, at least.
Is there a point where you look at the 9 weeks and you're saying you're looking at the replays, that kind of thing? Is there going to be a point where you're like, okay, obviously we did something wrong during that time, let's just throw everything out and kind of start fresh? Like, are there going to be moments where you're going to, the whole saying is those who fail to remember the past are doomed to repeat it or whatever. But is there a point where you're like, okay, that didn't work for us, so let's try something completely new and crazy and just, get out of that way of thinking?
Well, I don't really. It's really just like there's two ways to play, honestly. Like there's standard and then there's like kind of oddball stuff.
Yeah.
And usually you can get wins with oddball stuff, play it well, but it's very difficult to play oddball stuff well because it's oddball stuff. And it's very like specific and niche to how you're going to go into a game and like try to play it out, Like if you're doing a push strategy, it's like completely different than a team fight strategy, and everything about it is just like weird per se, and you need to practice it a lot to get all those weird angles like perfected. So like just like during the split, it basically came down to, do we play standard and hope we play better than them standard, or do we play weird stuff? And in the end, everybody just decided standard was better, even though looking back on it, the weird stuff was probably the better way to go.
I think in a prior interview you said that or possibly your AMA on Reddit, you said that the only reason that jungle Ezreal works is that it has to be in a push comp. Like it has to be something that, does Velocity thrive under the oddball, or were you guys playing like a normal comp under kind of an obligation to when you kind of really wanted to play oddball?
Well, it honestly, it felt just like we didn't have enough time to perfect the oddball stuff, but it just felt like if you lose with oddball stuff, it feels like you're not only wasting your own time, but your scrim partner's time. So that's one of the reasons why it's just like not that beneficial to play oddball, because if you're like trying oddball stuff against a good team, and they beat you, they don't learn anything really other than how to stop that oddball stuff. But they already stopped it, so it's not like they really needed to practice to stop that oddball stuff. And then the other thing with it is, if you were playing standard, you would get better playing standard against that team who's already good at standard. So it's kind of just like if you practice it, you're wasting someone else's time if you're not winning. And yeah, it's just really, that's kind of my view on the oddball strategies.
And I guess you could kind of argue that the normal strategies, or the kind of mundane or the accepted strategies anyway, they give you a lot of mechanical practice. So you're playing champions that you're going to be playing a lot, instead of an oddball composition where maybe you'll be able to bring it out once or twice before people kind of get a little wise to it anyway. Like I'm thinking about on the main stage of the LCS, you bring out someone like Victor that you were playing in the last week. It's like now people will at least have the expectation, or even if it's in the back of their mind, they're like, okay, they're not going to play Victor, but they kind of know that, okay, they've got this pocket Victor that can really take us by surprise. We're going to prepare for it, even if it's like the tiniest bit. It's almost like the time investment into those mundane strategies is kind of a little bit more
like it has to be a strategy that's like very difficult to counter. Like most push strategies are very difficult to counter if they don't see it coming.
Yeah, definitely.
Like you can just pick standard for like half the banning phase, and then you reveal you're doing a push strategy at the end, where then they only have one or two picks to kind of counteract it.
I think that's one of my favorite things about solo queue, or at least playing in duo, is picking like a Lux support, and then everyone thinks that you're countering a Lux middle, and then your last pick is something completely different, and then you can almost hear through the internet the other team cringing a little bit. It's great. It's always a great feeling. So kind of transitioning to two picks now. I looked at a little bit through your picks and ban strategy anyway, and I don't know if it's flattering to you that a lot of the other teams' bans seem to be directed specifically at you. At least one. There's always at least one ban. It's either your Elise or your Lee Sin. And I guess that's something that I've been curious to ask all players, is how do you kind of view a specific targeted ban at you?
When people target ban you, it's just like it's good and bad because when they ban you, it gives your team the opportunity to shine.
Yeah.
One of the kind of problems we had was Chris and Elise. Like Chris and I both played Elise. Like we were both good Elise players. Chris was a very, very good Elise player. So banning that effectively hurt both of us, which was a good ban on their part. And like probably what we should have done was each learn. Like basically, you need to have enough heroes where you can just absolutely dominate the other team with it. They can't ban you out. And that's usually like the case. Like if you think back to like Velocity a long time ago, back when like Draven was OP,
Yeah.
and Elise was OP, and like there were a whole bunch of OP things like that were just around. It was basically like if they banned Elise for Chris, then we'd get Draven, or we'd get like Rumble for Prawley, or you'd get something. There's always like you want to have at least 4 or 5 heroes that just like turn the game in your favor by getting those.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the goal. So like I don't mind pulling bans. It's kind of frustrating when you can't play your best hero, but you just kind of have to remember that your teammates also have their best heroes that they can play.
And the interesting thing anyway in terms of like your top played champions, or at least the champions you had the best success with, Jarvan, Evelynn, Lee Sin, is they all kind of play a little bit similar. I think you said in an earlier interview that both of them, or like all 3 of them, have the potential to carry like if they have their own kills or change the course of a lane. So I guess, do you want to maybe explain a little bit of your mindset of why you look specifically to those champions?
The reason I like all 3 of those heroes is they're high mobility, and they have unique like kind of movement patterns across the map, which I think makes them very strong junglers. Like Lee Sin can ward hop over walls, he can Q 2 minions over walls, and then he's got a very strong ganking at level 6 if you do like the ward jump kick, or the insect that people call it. So like all 3 of those heroes have unique movement patterns in common, which is what I like a lot about all 3 of those heroes. And then the other thing I like about those heroes is they're very good at like initiating, which is like basically what the jungler's job is to do, to initiate. And I think all 3 of those heroes are some of the best initiators in the game.
Especially Jarvan, where even if you don't hit anyone with an EQ or just use it to gap close, you still have the Cataclysm that really can close a gap. Like if you think about it, especially with Flash, you can cover an extreme amount of ground with Jarvan. And to a lesser extent, I guess, Evelynn with, her W being able to move faster, that kind of stuff.
Well, with Eve, it's more like you don't need to necessarily cover ground because you can be behind them. Or like on their side. Like it's not necessarily like you don't have to just go straight at them. You can come from anywhere.
Yeah. And I think that was something that we saw a lot in the early stages of the LCS with Vi, was being able to use Vault Breaker over things like the Dragon Wall, or commonly warded areas. And especially as people, I think, are finding optimal ward positions, like people are finding places that cover the maximum amount of entrances and exits from the jungle. And like, especially the more that happens, as a jungler, I find you need to be like the most creative person on the team anyway in terms of making things happen.
Yeah, in competitive play, jungling is like completely different than jungling in solo queue.
Yeah, totally.
Because in solo queue, you just run around and kill everybody. That's pretty much solo queue. Like nobody wards, nobody buys wards later on in the game. It's literally just running around and being like, this guy's overextended, so we kill him, and then you just keep doing that. Yeah.
Could you... Oh, sorry, continue.
Yeah, and then I was just going to say, like, in competitive play, it's like there's 3 wards down at level 1. Like you check their support as soon as they show up the lane, and you might not necessarily know where 2 of them are, but you know where 1 is, so you kind of have to, like, remember in your head where these wards are, what walls you can go over to avoid these wards, and just, like, what the best way to, like, get a kill on a lane that needs help or relieve pressure or apply pressure all over the map. It's just really different.
And especially with the introduction of Explorer wards, like you have to keep in mind where that ward was placed, but you almost have to say, I can't even think that it might be the 1 minute ward, because it's a 3 minute ward, then I'm walking around somewhere where I think that's, I'm fine.
It's really important. If you see a ward, you have to click it so you know what it is.
Yeah, of course. Does it show the different icon?
It shows the timer.
Okay.
It shows the timer. If you click it, it shows 60 seconds or 180 seconds.
Okay. I didn't know if it... I guess my question was if it showed like the different color, because I know that the blue, or the Explorer ward's blue.
Yeah.
But no, that's cool. Of course, I ward a lot during solo queue, but as a jungler, those are things that I don't necessarily think about. And I guess one of the opportunities I want to take having you here is like, imagine someone who has very little experience playing jungle, or has has very little experience being in the kind of mindset of a jungler. Like, you have so much to worry about as a jungler because you've got your side of the jungle, the opponent's side of the jungle if you feel like counter jungling, and then you kind of have to keep an eye on all three of the lanes. So it's a lot more to think about comparison to kind of like a mid who, you know, might roam when the the situation presents itself, but ultimately you're kind of just focusing on your lane first and foremost. And with a jungler, it's kind of everything is first and foremost. So what advice would you give to like kind of novice junglers anyway, in terms of, you know, getting more comfortable thinking in different ways, or just finding success at their role?
I'd say one of the biggest things that like will help you in lower level solo queue is you don't really have to worry about wards so much at like lower levels. So it's basically just like if some guy blows flash and he keeps being stupid, then just keep killing him. A lot of people don't do that, but if they're being dumb, just keep killing them. Free money is free money. You might as well collect it. Then the other thing pretty much is like know lane matchups. If you don't know the lane matchup, ask your laner if he knows it. Because like if you have a really, really bad lane matchup somewhere, like if you have like Vlad versus Ryze, right?
Yeah.
Vlad just gets dumpstered by Ryze. And if you don't know that, what's going to happen is, like, say the Vlad's on your team, and he doesn't know he gets dumpstered by Ryze, and you don't know he gets dumpstered by Ryze, that Vlad's going to feed really, really hard. And if you knew that, you could potentially prevent that by pressuring the Ryze and ganking him.
Yeah.
So that he's not as strong, he has to back, and Vlad gets a little bit of a level advantage. And then once he gets items, he might be alright. But it's really important that, like, if you don't know the matchups, you ask somebody on your team, probably the guy laning against him, if they know the matchup, and then you kind of go from there. Because if you don't know who on your team is able to be successful straight up 1v1 and who's not able to be successful straight up 1v1, you're going to have a problem because you're going to be prioritizing ganks in the wrong lanes at the wrong times.
Do you have any, like, my kind of rule of thumb with solo queue compositions is the more hard CC, the better. Because the more click stuns or the more kind of like ways to lock people down, the more like surefire initiation methods. I love playing Leona in support because, you know, as long as you hit something, that person's going to be locked down. Do you have any kind of recommendations in terms of beginning champions for, you know, novice junglers?
If you don't know what you're doing, always pick CC. Like, if you're bad at jungling or new to jungling, like, don't pick Shyvana or don't pick, like, I don't know what else, like Lee Sin, or don't pick, like, characters like that who have no CC, because what's going to end up happening is, like, say you get behind, like, they counter jungle you, and they screw you over royally, right, so that you can't even, like, enter your jungle, right? As long as you have crowd control, no matter how fed that guy is, you can still kill him.
Yeah, because, well, you can at least lock it up for the rest of your team.
Right, you can lock him down for the rest of your team.
Yeah.
So it's basically like, if you're new, prioritize junglers like Jarvan or Amumu or any like character with crowd control. Yeah.
I think that's one of the things we're seeing with Zach being such a force of nature in RIP force of nature. I didn't mean to make that pun. But a force of nature in LCS anyway is that he's got like a really good mix of all the things that we've talked about here anyway. You know, the crowd control off of his regular moves, the ability to kind of dive with his passive, being able to skip ward commonly warded areas with the slingshot, let's bounce, you know, that kind of stuff. You think you've only picked him once in the LCS. Is that just a matter of you not having an affinity for the champion, or someone else getting him before you do?
It's usually because when you pick Zac, you need lots of like lane farm. Like if you watch Zacs who are successful junglers, they pretty much lane farm like a lot. And I think personally one of the problems with Zac as a jungler is like if you put lots of lane farm on your jungler and he's a tank initiator kind of jungler, then I don't know necessarily what your top is going to do, or whoever is giving up the farm, I don't necessarily know how useful they're going to be. So like if you compare the common top picks, if you had a Zac, it'd be some like DPS character probably. So in our case, it'd probably be like Riven or Elise or like Vlad, something like that. And all three of those characters need farm to some extent, except Elise, but she's probably banned because she's broken. More broken than Zac, right? So like if you look at other picks that you'd fill for the damage role, like top lane, to give Zach farm in the jungle, there's like not many at all, if there are any. Which is why I don't think he's a very good jungler personally. But the way Cloud9 does it is they basically scrap Sneaky's farm for Zach, which is why it works for them. That's why Meteos is always really good on Zach, because if you look at the farm he gets, it's really, really high. If you look at the farm Sneaky gets, it's not nearly as high. They just split farm really, really well to the Zach so that he can be successful.
I guess kind of wrapping up the interview, now that you guys are facing relegation, you're going to be going into a tournament with other teams. You kind of have a unique position because you've been on the side of the challenger where you guys are hungry and trying to get in, and now you've got the perspective of the other side where someone like Complexity is doing really well in the MCS right now, and they potentially could be one of the teams that you guys are going to be facing. Have you guys done any kind of like beginning scouting in terms of challenger teams that you might be facing?
I feel like in the challenger tournaments I've watched, it seems like all the amateur teams are very similar to what they were when we were in the amateur scene. Like, they play very similar champions to what they played when we were there.
Yeah.
They have similar play styles. Like, it's all like very similar. So pretty much it's just like there's still a 3-month window for all of that to change. So I haven't really done any research like about it yet, because there's still 3 months to go.
Yeah.
I figure like in the month leading up, that's the time where research would be the most important, because even in a month a lot can change.
Like 3 months, that's like an absurd amount of time. That's like a
Right.
split and a little bit, and considering the amount of changes that we've seen even in patching from the beginning of the split to now, that's you bring up a really good point there. But I really just wanted to say thank you for taking the time in order to talk to us. I really wish Velocity the best in terms of growing and kind of learning from what happened in the split, and hopefully we'll see you guys in the next split. Do you have any shout outs or anything that you wanted to do just before we sign off?
I just want to give a shout out to my grandma.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, and other than that, I think I'm good to go.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Anyways, this has been another episode of the Interleague. If you guys wanted to check out, you guys can actually subscribe to us on YouTube. That'd really help. You can also check out lolking.net for more League of Legends news, some contest giveaways, the profiles and stats that we are famous for. And you can give me a follow at Matt Demers on Twitter if you want to. Thank you so much. Have a good day.